The first thing is to separate your have tos from your want tos. Again, to separate your have tos from your want tos. What I mean is that there's a lot of things that we say, I have to do this. I have to show up here. I have to present myself this way. I can't do it that way because I have to do this. A lot of those have tos are actually want tos. A lot of those have tos are actually want tos. I have to not present this way because I don't want to have a conflict. I don't want to have a conflict. I have to have this person in my life because I don't want to lose certain benefits I get from them being around. I have to keep having this particular mask, particular way that I am talking with people because if I change, then I'm going to lose some clout with that. I went through some of this when I did less journalism. I have 2 degrees in journalism, master's in magazine publishing. Very proud journalist. Journalist since I was a little bit older than my eldest son. So I started when I was around 14. And then around the time I was 34, 35, then I became an entrepreneur twice over. Second one was called Cuddler. It was a startup. It was an app that connected people for hugs. We ended up selling the app after it became number one app in the world. I think it was from 2014 going to 2015. We sold it in summer of 2015. Around the time my eldest son had just turned 2. My youngest hadn't been born yet, and I came back to journalism, and I was like, well, I feel like I'm not a journalist anymore. Right? I was a founder. I sold the company. Shout out to my 2 co-founders. We sold the company. Da da da. Well, what am I? And what I realized is that a lot of my identity was tied into being a journalist. A lot of my identity was saying, okay, I went to, at the time, the number one journalism school in the country ranked. Shout out to Northwestern. And it's like, when I started to let that go and say, well, I don't have to be a journalist, then that's when my column started with Inc. magazine. Shout out to Inc. My columns are still up if you go to inc.com. Started my column with Inc. magazine. I started coaching practice. Shout out to the hundreds of y'all that I've coached now, and I'm still coaching. That's when the Bites Entrepreneur started, and that's when and that was the first bestseller of all the books that are featured in the Bring Your Worth collection. And so when I let that go, what I have to do, then suddenly I realized, oh, I wanted to continue to have the cloud of being a journalist, but that doesn't fit who I am anymore. That also applies to how we show up with our family, how we show up with the people that we love. There are certain ways that we can be closer to our true selves without confining ourselves to a certain space. I talk about this quite a bit more in my weekly newsletter, uh, today's newsletter, called Do You Have to Do It? You can click the link below. It's free. It's every Wednesday at 5:55 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. I talk about it more extensively here. But to paraphrase one of the lines in there, it's like, what happens when the armor of who you were as a child becomes too tight? You go to Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, Yom Kippur, Separate Liberation, or whatever it happens to be, Diwali, and you're still showing up in the same way that you showed up when you were a child. And you're like, you got gray hairs like I am. At a certain point, you're going to be constricted. What happens when that armor that you wear, where you're doing way more emotional labor than what you should be doing? You're carrying other people's stuff. You're worried about what other people are doing. Other people are emotionally immature, so you're taking on their stuff. What happens when that armor is too heavy to lift and suddenly your life is being constricted? Suddenly you start being having health issues and start getting stressed out. At what point does it topple over and you say enough's enough? For a lot of us, frankly, for a lot of us, we just keep wearing the armor. We keep being weighed down. We keep being too tight. We keep struggling with it. And we just deal with it because we feel like that's what we're supposed to do. That's where we're supposed to be in our family. That's our lot in life. But sometimes life will step in and will physically, mentally, or emotionally come in and say, no, you literally can't do this anymore. You're going to have that breakdown. You're, you're going to start yelling at people when they try to put you in that box. You're going to have this health thing that's going to remind you that these are want tos, they're not have tos. The only thing you have to do is be an amazing person and show up as your best. That's all you got to do. The rest of it is optional. The rest of it might be based on other people's expectations. When we get into the holidays, when we get into any type of celebrations, that's when we're hanging out with other people, and other people got their own baggage. It's not your job to carry it. But sometimes we have to go down a certain route and realize that. So number one thing is to separate your have tos to your want tos from your want tos. Yes, you might have to stop at so and so's house. You know that person's house. Where you're back at home or your home city or whatever, you got to stop at so and so's house. You know there's probably going to be drama there. But how long are you going to stay? Or do you have to stop at so and so's house? Maybe you don't have to. Separate those have tos from those want tos. Those have tos, you got to honor them. Those want tos though, separate them enough to make sure that you have some peace of mind. Speaking of that, my favorite book right now, man, I hope you are reading some of these. I'm stumbling upon some bangers. Shout out to Ray. I love you to death. He recommended this book, as well as some other folks recommended it to me. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Sounds like an ether. Shout out to Nas. It does. Sounds like a burn. Whatever generation you're part of, it sounds like shots are being fired. And they are. The thing is, though, is that as I joked with someone recently, you know who you are. The calls are actually coming from inside the house. If that's not a double entendre, I don't know what is. This book is fantastic. It talks about how there, it says parents, but the limitations of the people that raised us. Could be parents, could be grandparents, could be guardians, foster parents, whatever your vibe is. Those people that were around you to help mold you into who you are. When we're children, and this is what most kids do, we assume that they always have our best interests in mind. After doing something, it's best for us. It is in our best interest. You're good. And this book is basically arguing no, actually, because some of the people that raised us, some people that are around, some of the adults, they were jacked up. And sometimes that is being projected onto you. This is what I talk about with emotional labor. It's there's so many definitions of the words. Even with people that I care about, my friends, we'll say the words emotional labor and we'll mean 15 different things. What I mean by emotional labor is someone's not able to deal with their emotions. They're overwhelmed or they shut down or what have you. And you're helping to pick up those pieces. Sometimes you're doing that for the people that are actually supposed to be protecting you. This book gets into it. It is a showstopper. It's fantastic. I know a lot of you are going to family gatherings or people that raised you, whatever. Please read this book before you get there. Please. I almost didn't do a program today because I got other things going on. I got some deadlines, a lot of exciting stuff happening behind the scenes. But I was like, I have to get on today. So I just finished this book. You see the dog ears. I was like, I got to let fam, meaning you, know what's happening before you get to the holiday season, at least the major holiday season here in America. Fam, go ahead, pick it up. It's a fantastic book. I think it's also important too. Not only was I able to read through there and identify some of the stuff that happened to me when I was a kid, but also I have an 8 and 11-year-old. So the dynamics I have with my co-parenting partner, the dynamics I have with the kids, how I'm showing up, even though I work really hard for y'all, for my co-parenting partner, for my kids, for my family to be as honest with myself and as clear with myself, there's still stuff I need to work on. That reminded me of this book. I was proud of the work that I've done because I realized how much I've grown despite some of the stuff that happened when I was a child. I talk about it in my books. I'm not going to get into it here. But there's always room to grow. So it's not an indictment of the people that raised you or the adults that you were around when you were a kid. It's also a discussion about how you can be a more mature adult. Fantastic book. Can't recommend it enough. There's been so many bangers this year. This book is old too. I want to say it's like 10 years old. Mm. But you also see it sold. three-quarters of a million copies. So if you're worried about the holiday season, if you got family drama, whatever, you got a three-quarter of a million people who feel the same way. So much love to you. If you're not looking forward to hanging out in the holidays, whatever, grab this book. Maybe you have some type of framework to set those boundaries, which we'll talk about boundaries a little bit more in a minute. Speaking of, exactly a year ago, Brene Brown's 3 Ways to Deal with Holiday Drama. It's super short. If I explained it more than 3 minutes, it'd be longer than this episode. 3 things that you can do to stave off holiday drama. That's it. Check it out after we're done. Really quick episode. And Brene Brown, I love her work. And a lot of y'all do too, based on some of the videos that I put up. It's a lot of that energy. Say no more. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. This is Bring Your Worth TV. I'm here on Wednesdays live at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. And my latest book, Complete Bring Your Worth Collection. If you're watching on Amazon, the links are right there. Elsewhere, you can go and click on the links below. And of course, you can check out the audiobook for free at that link right there, youtube.b/ all the rest of that jazz. So how are y'all separating your have tos from your have wants? Do you have a hard time separating them? How do you distinguish between the stuff that's really important and the stuff that maybe somebody's coercing you to do? Or maybe, which is the tricky part, your past self, I don't mean past lives, I mean your younger self, those things that you promised that you do for a short period of time when you were younger. How are those handcuffs starting to feel when you realize you don't want to do that anymore? How are you working yourself out of it? That's what I'm trying to say. Jump into the comments if you feel like sharing that. I love to hear it. I share some of this in my books, including obviously in the Complete Bring Your Worth collection and with some previous episodes. You know, if you want some insight in that or stuff that I've dealt with, feel free to hit rewind. All right.